Hi, I'm Sarah, and today we're sewing the Elmwood Skirt by Cashmerette, which is part of their monthly Cashmerette Club membership program. If you want to learn more about joining the club, check out cashmerette.com/club, or there's a link in the description. Let's get sewing. For my fabrics today, I'm using a Bimberg rayon for the lining, and I'm using a quilting cotton for the pockets, and a lightweight canvas for the outer shell. Okay, there's a couple of things that we need to do before we start sewing, and that is interfacing our waistband. So we're just going to interface one set of waistbands, the others can stay uninterfaced. And we're also going to interface this little pocket opening on the front skirt. You're going to need an invisible zipper, and I'm going to use one that's 2 inches longer than the one called for because I do find it a little easier to sew at the very bottom when you have a little extra zipper, but you can use one that's the same length as the one required. The other thing you're going to notice is that I've pre-finished all of my seam edges, and I did this for one of 2 reasons. One, because it'll be easier to keep sewing during the video, and 2, because it's a lined garment. You may not need to finish any of your edges depending on your fabric choice. For the lining, I definitely wanted to finish those edges because I know this lining is going to fray and unravel and get a little messy on the inside, so I'm trying to keep it nice and clean. So if you want to overlock or finish any of your edges, I recommend doing all of them except for the waist. You don't have to do the waist. If you do, that's fine. This is the pocket facing here, and this is the pocket. You can tell I didn't do the pocket opening on the front or the waist here. I did all edges on all of my lining pieces. And then when it comes to the waistband, the interfaced pieces don't need to get any finishing because all of them will be enclosed. But for the waistband that didn't get any interfacing, we just need this bottom edge to get finished if you need it, because this edge will poke down into the skirt and it won't get enclosed in the waistband. Otherwise, you can finish your seams as you go. That works as well, unless your fabric doesn't need any finishing at all. Let's get sewing. Our seam allowances today are 1/2 inch, unless I tell you otherwise, and my stitch length is a 2.5 millimeter. All right, our first step will be to attach the pocket facing to the bottom pocket here. So I'm going to line this up to the side seam edge here. And you might be able to see that my notches are indeed notched here. I tried to make them kind of big so you can still see them through the serging there. You see that little triangle cut out? And we're just going to line those up, and we're going to stitch around this rounded edge here. All right, we're going to attach our pockets to the outer shell. So we're going to line up your top pocket to the opening here, and we're going to stitch this opening at 1/2 inch seam allowance. Keep your needle down when you pivot, and we'll repeat for the other side. All right, we're going to clip to the corner here, up to the stitching. Now we're going to press it and understitch. All right, we're just going to press this seam allowance. Just press it one direction for now. We'll do both sides. And then we're going to flip this to the other side, turn, just like this. And we want to see a little bit of our shell poking up on this side so we know our lining won't show on the right side when we're all done. All right, now we're going to understitch our pocket opening here, and we're going to start from the waist and go to the point, and then backstitch there, and then we're going to start from the side seam and go to the point. And this is because our seam allowance doesn't actually go all the way around the corner here, so it'll look a lot nicer if we just stop right there at the point. All right, so we're going to push the seam allowance towards the pocket. When you get to the point, you can backstitch and then pick it up and start from the other end. You notice I don't backstitch at the side seam, and that's okay because it's going to get enclosed in the side seam. All right, and we'll repeat for our other opening here. Okay, so now we're going to lay our under pocket flush with the side seam and the waist edge here, just like this, and we're going to sew these two edges, right sides together. Repeat for our other side. All right, now we're going to line up our pocket to the waist seam and the side seam, and make sure your pocket's nice and flat. This way you don't get any buckling. If it doesn't quite meet the edge there, or maybe it goes a little past, that's okay. Don't force it to line up perfectly, because you might get some buckling, you know, happening like this in your skirt. So make sure it's nice and flat. As long as it is within that seam allowance, you're going to be fine. We'll just tack it in the seam allowance. All right, there's our front. It's looking like an Elmwood skirt. Looks really cute. All right, we're going to sew darts now, and so you'll notice that I have a little hole there that'll get enclosed in my dart leg, so that's how I'm able to see exactly where I finish. So we're going to start at the top there, match up our notches, fold right at the vanishing point of your dart, and go right to your marking. I don't backstitch, I leave a tail and I hand tie my darts. We'll do our other side now. All right, let's press our darts. And we're going to press the dart towards the center back seam, which is going to be your straight edge there. All right, we're also going to sew our darts on our lining. So make sure if your lining doesn't have a clear right or wrong side, you don't end up with two lefts or two rights. So make sure that you have a left and a right back skirt once you're done. All right, we're gonna press our darts. All right, next we're gonna sew our side seam. So we're gonna lay our shell right sides together, and we're gonna sew our side seam. Make sure your pocket's laying nice and flat and you don't skew any of those edges there. We're going to repeat for our other side, and we're also going to do this for our lining as well. All right, let's sew our side seams of our lining. Your notches are going to be really important here. It's kind of hard to tell the top from the bottom once you have all their seams finished, so make sure you look at those closely. Okay, so we're going to press our seams now, and I've decided that I'm going to follow the instructions and press mine the way that they suggest, where the shell gets pressed towards the back and the lining gets pressed towards the front, and this is because of the bulk of the pocket at the side seam, so pressing the seam open there would be a little bit tricky. So let's press our side seams. All right, we're going to assemble our waistband here, and we're just going to sew the side seams of both the outer waistband and the inner waistband. And we'll just line it up here at the notches. All right, let's press our seams open. All right, we're going to attach our outer waistband to the shell. So you want your interfaced waistband here. And we're going to put this right sides together along the top edge. And you want that long, slightly curved outward edge to line up there. And all your seams should line up. Your side seam should match the side seam of the shell. Your center should match the center of the front. We're going to sew this 1/2 inch seam. Make sure your darts and seams don't get pressed the other way. You might have to arrange your pocket, get it laying flat again so it doesn't get caught. All right, and we're going to press this seam up into the waistband, but first we're going to sew our lining waistband. All right, we're going to sew this waistband, the uninterfaced one, to the top edge as well. Right sides together. All right, we're going to press the seam allowance down toward the lining of the waistband. We're going to press the seam allowance down toward the lining. And for the shell, we're going to press the seam allowance going toward the waistband. So you can see I have it pressed up toward the waistband. Okay, now we're going to install our invisible zipper, and it's going to be just fine, I promise. Invisible zippers are actually pretty straightforward to install. There's just a few funny little things about them. Once you know those, they go pretty smooth. So the way an invisible zipper works is that it's been made so that this coil chain right here of the zipper, you can see I can peel it back a little bit. And that's so that when you get the stitches kind of nestled into that little crease there, when it's done, it will kind of pull it around, and then that way it's only fabric showing on the right side. So what we do first is we're going to gently press this open, not too high of a heat. You're going to press this flat as you can. It's going to be a little fiddly, and be careful of your fingers. And just do your best. It's just kind of the nature of the thing. One of my tips is if you're using a really, really lightweight fabric, I recommend putting a really narrow strip of interfacing along the opening where the zipper is going to go, just to give it a little bit more substance there. All right, and we have a notch down here. Now, like I said at the beginning, I'm using a zipper that's 2 inches longer than what we need. And this is because it's really hard to sew at the bottom and get that seam kind of shut when you go to sew the center back below the zipper notch. And so when you have this extra zipper length, it kind of gives you space to do this, and you'll see. And if you don't have that, that's fine. You just do your best. You're still going to have a long enough zipper to get this on and off. All right, so I'm going to press my zipper open. Now, if you have a zipper foot, you will probably want to use it because you want to get really, really, really close to the zipper, and you want to be able to control it. And it is going to be a little fiddly because the teeth of the zipper might push your presser foot away. My machine doesn't have a standard zipper foot, so I have an invisible zipper foot, and all it does is let the machine run along the coils and then puts my needle right next to it. And so it's just going to be a little bit easier of a way to do this. There's also invisible zipper foot kits, like just a plastic one that you can get for most machines. So if you have one of those, or if you have an invisible zipper foot, great. I never had one of these before, and I just got this recently, and so I usually use my regular presser foot. I find it a lot easier than the zipper foot that came with my machine, and that's because I can use this to kind of press the zipper down and open, and I'm just really careful about where I sew. And then you can also use something like a hump jumper, which will even out your presser foot, and then that way you'll have even feeding with your feed dogs if you kind of shore it up a little bit. So there's a lot of little strategies to doing this. I'm making it sound really hard, but I'm just trying to give you lots of options for your machine and what kind of foot you have, and well, how you want to go about this. All right, so we're going to put this right sides together. And so I think the tricky part about an invisible zipper is that it's really easy to mistake the right and the wrong side when you kind of get past this first step. So I like to put it as if it's going to be sewn. So this right now, this is my zipper face up, right? And this is my skirt face up. And now I'm just going to, this is the edge that needs to go to this side of my back, right? So we're going to take this edge, flip it over, and put it right sides together, just like that. Now we know that this is how it goes. Now we can spend our time kind of getting it in position. So you're going to need a 1/2 inch seam allowance up here at the top. This invisible zipper tape is pretty short. It's about a 1/2 inch as well, so I'm just going to put it just shy. And I also want this seam to land on the 1/2 inch seam line. And that's good because my serging is pretty wide. So like I said before, you're trying to stitch in this little edge here so that now my zipper is pressed open, right? And so you want to try and get into this little nook here and just do your best there. All right, so we're going to position this on here. And I think I'll just use a couple of clips today. And then I can see my notch right here. So that's really where my zipper needs to end up being. The other really key thing about sewing one of these is that when you stitch along here, you need this stitching to end in the exact same place it does on the other side. So when you go to the second side, make sure the stitching is right across from one another. All right, so let's put on my foot. All right, so remember your zipper's right sides together and you're stitching right in the nook of this little fold here. And on a lot of invisible zippers, the tape has a different weaving right there where you need to stitch. So once you press it open, you'll see that little area there. All right, and I'm gonna sew here. Had to get it a little bit over that thickness. Okay, and here's my notch right here. I'm not going to go past it. I'm just going to sew up to the notch. And if you used a 7-inch zipper, you're probably going to have a little trouble getting all the way down there because see, here's the zipper head. It's going to be in the way. And so you might be about 1 inch above that. All right, here we go. Nice. It's gonna look pretty good. All right, so now we're gonna do the other side. All right, so now we're gonna do our other side. And I have my skirt here. I have my zipper zipped up and my skirt right sides together. And I'm just going to find a few landmarks here so that I can make sure I do my best to get my waistband directly across from one another, just like this. Get that seam there. We'll try our best. You know, sometimes things happen, things get pushed out of the way as we're sewing. We know that can happen. All right, so we're gonna clip that. And then the other thing we're gonna do is we're gonna mark on the zipper here exactly where we stopped stitching so I can see it deep in there, just like that. So I'm gonna get a little pencil here to mark that. That's exactly where I want to stop on my zipper tape. All right, and so now I'm going to unzip my zipper. I know I'm going to want more pins or clips, but we're going to unzip it first before we add more because it gets kind of tricky. Get past my clip there, and I'm going to unzip it all the way. And now put in more pins if you want. All right, so we're going to do the other side now. And normally what I would do is start from the top and go down again if I can, if there's space for that. But because of the camera, and so you can see what I'm doing, I'm going to flip this over and go from the bottom up. But if you can, I recommend going from the top down. If you did the top down from on the other side, just being really consistent about that. It will help the alignment of your waistband a little bit so that you're not approaching this seam with your presser foot and it pushes it away this way, whereas this one, it pushed it away going the other direction. So that's just one of my tips. But just so that you can see really well, I'm going to keep it with it on the left side of my machine here. All right, and so I'm looking for that mark, which I'm not sure you can see, it's right here. And that's where I'm gonna start my stitching. Best I can, because my foot is actually, it is getting a little too close to the bottom here. All right, I'm going to hold my awl on here so that it doesn't shift, hopefully. All right. All right, moment of truth. Let's see how I did. Oh, not bad. It's probably one of my best ones. Okay, now we're going to sew the center back seam between the end of the zipper and this notch right here at the top of the vent. So you want to make sure that your zipper, you want to zip it up a little bit because you don't want to accidentally enclose the zipper head of your zipper. And this is what makes this part so hard because it'd be a lot easier if we didn't have the zipper zipped right there. So we're going to line up the center back seam. We're going to pull the zipper out of the way best we can, and we're going to sew as close to where we stopped sewing the zipper as possible. Let it know who's boss there. All right, we're going to line up our seam here, and there's our notch. There we go. Now we're going to press this back seam open with the iron. We're going to press this seam allowance here as well. Okay, so we're going to add a few stitches right at the top of the vent to reinforce it here. So we're just going to sew straight across the top of this vent here. You can even do a little triangle or something decorative if you want as well. Next, we're going to hem our lining in preparation for attaching it to the skirt shell. So we have a 1-inch hem allowance. We're going to turn it 1/2 inch and a 1/2 inch, and then we're going to stitch it from the right side. So let's get pressing. All right, so we have our hem pressed up, but we're going to stitch this from the right side. I can see where my seam is pressed there. I'm just going to hem the whole skirt lining. All right, we're going to attach our lining to the shell. So open up your zipper and press it open. And we're going to put our lining right sides together to the shell of the skirt, lining up the top waistband edge. So we're going to now sew our waistbands together. And we're going to start and stop about 1 inch away from the center back edge here. So we're going to start 1 inch away and sew it at our regular seam allowance. Matching all of your side seams, centers, things like that. And again, when you get to the end, don't forget to stop 1 inch before the center back seam. All right, just like that. All right, so now you're going to turn your skirt right side out, and we're going to understitch the waistband, but just the part that we sewed. So we're going to press our waistband seam here toward the skirt lining, and we're going to understitch this about 2 inches away from the center back seam right here, starting about right there. And I don't have a free arm on my machine, so I'm going to turn my skirt right side or inside out. It'll be a lot easier for me to be able to keep this flat without the skirt sneaking under, getting caught on the seam there. All right, so we're going to press the seam allowance towards the lining and start about 2 inches away. All right, and don't forget to stop 2 inches away here, about right there. All right, so we're going to put our lining inside the skirt, right sides together again. All right, we're going to attach our lining just at the center back here. So make sure that you put your waistbands together just like this. And remember that your seam allowance on the lining is going down into the skirt, whereas on the waistband of the outer shell, it's going up into the waistband. So just nestle those seams just like that to one another. And we're going to sew this about 1/8 of an inch away from our original stitching, maybe a little more if you have a thicker outer shell. And this is just going to secure the lining so it doesn't get pulled. And we're only going to sew it at the center back here for a little ways. We're just going to sew it just to the notch, or maybe just past it if you want. All right, so let's do our first one here, and we still have this little open edge, that little opening there, and that's fine. We're going to fix that in a second. You're probably going to have to use a zipper foot for this because the coil is going to push your foot away otherwise. I'm going to go right next to it. Make sure you don't catch any of your other skirt in here. It is a little fiddly. We've got a lot going on here, so just concentrate on the edges that we're sewing. We're only sewing the one center back and one lining right now, just like that. All right, now we're going to flip it to the other side and do the same thing. So match up those waistbands just like this, nestle those seams together. And I'm going to try and sew from this side so I can see my seam that I already sewed. All right, so I've matched up that notch Just focus on those two edges. I know it feels like there's a lot going on right there, but it's going to be okay. It's going to be hard to get close to your starting point here because the zipper pole is in the way. That's how it'll feel. All right, now we're going to finish this top edge. So you're going to fold this seam allowance over to the shell side of your skirt here so that you can feel the zipper coil teeth in right here in this fold edge right here. And we're going to sew across the top, finishing this seam right here. Just line it up right there with what we've already sewn. And then we're going to clip this corner. I'm going to reinforce it just a little bit since my canvas is a bit open weave there, and that's going to be a high stress area. So there we go. And so now let's do the other side. All right, so here, this is our zipper edge right here, and we're going to fold this zipper edge here toward the shell of the skirt. So this is the shell side, and you're going to feel for that zipper teeth to be right on the fold there, just like that. So don't fold before the zipper coil there. Right now the zipper coil is on this side of the fold. We want it on the other side of the fold. So like this, we're going to go a little bit further, and so there's the zipper coil right there. And we're going to sew across the top here. And one thing I kind of want to check, but it's going to be a little bit hard right now, is to make sure that my center backs are going to match right here. So I'm just going to hold them up like this and see. And it looks like this side might be slightly higher. So I'm just going to sew it a little bit further down. That makes sense that I'm not using the full ½ inch seam allowance, it looks like. There we go. And now trim that other corner. All right, now we're going to turn our skirt right side out and push the lining inside the skirt. And we're going to turn this little corner out right here. Get rid of this understitching thread. And we're going to gently pull out this corner, just like that. Same with this side, like that. There we go, looking good. Test your zipper now. Ooh, looking good. Let's fuss with this a little bit more here. Get that corner going. We can always add a hook and eye later on too. All right, now we're going to give this a pressing, and we're going to make sure that all this is laying nice and flat. And we're going to stitch in the ditch from the right side through our waistband and catch the under waistband. We're going to do it from the right side, so it's going to look good. All right, so let's go take this to the iron. I'm going to turn my skirt inside out so it's a little easier to iron. And I try and iron it in the shape of the curve of the waistband. It'll lay a little nicer like that. Okay, so from the right side, we're going to stitch in the ditch. Now, if you want to put some pins just to kind of keep things from wiggling and moving around there, go for it. I'm going to make sure that my side seams here are stacked. Things like that. Make sure that your seam allowances are pressed correctly so the lining goes down into the skirt and the shell goes up into the waistband. That way we'll offset that thickness. It'll be a nice smooth finish and we'll have that bulk there. Like I said, I'm always trying to make this in the shape of this waistband here. Don't try and straighten it out like this because you're getting this buckling right here. You know, if it's straight like that, it will just poke up. So we want this nice and flat. Nice and curved. All right, and we're going to stitch right in the ditch, which means we're going to gently pull apart this seam a little bit, and we're going to stitch right in that crevice of our previous seam. We're not worried about how it looks on the underside. It's really nice if it lines up with the seam on the other side, but most likely it won't. There's too many places for error to do that, for the cutting and sewing and stuff like that, and fabric choice. So we're just going to do this from the right side so it looks really nice from the right side. And again, I'm always trying to keep this in the shape of the waistband. That's how it wants to be. All right, it's looking really good. All right, we're gonna sew the seam here below the zipper on the lining here, so we still have this to finish. So we're gonna pull up the lining and put it right sides together. Just pull it above the skirt here, just like this. And we're gonna sew as high up as we can here, down to the notch where the vent is. Here's my notch right here. So let's put a little pin there so we know. And then we're gonna get this, try to get this nice and even on both sides. Go as high up as we can. Right sides together at our seam allowance. All right, now we're going to press the seam open and we're going to hem around the vent here. We're going to iron this hem right here around the vent, and we need to clip into the seam allowance right here where we stopped sewing. So we're going to clip right into the seam allowance there. And now we're going to turn this 1/4 of an inch and 1/4 inch. So you have a 1/2 inch allowance here, because it's basically your seam allowance, to hem this little opening. All right, so we're going to hem, starting from the hem of the lining, and we're going to go up and around the whole opening. So we're going to turn that double 1/4 inch turn. Try and get a right angle, like make sure that this fold lines up with this edge of the hem here, because it wants to get a little wonky there. And so you see how I straighten out the skirt, and I put the other side of the vent poking straight up. I don't pull it down here because we're going to turn and go across and then back down. So I'm trying to put it into the shape that it's finally going to be, and then so that I don't distort any of this. So we're going to go up. I go like 1/4 of an inch above, across, and then straight down the other side. And here's where I was talking about trying to get this fold edge right here lined up with the hem rather than it tilting up just like that. Lining is really fiddly. So you gotta let it know who's boss. All right. Trim our threads. All right, we're almost done. We're just going to hem the skirt now. So I already have this pre-overlocked edge. If you need to do the same, go for it. We're going to turn our hem up 1.5 inches, right sides together, right along the vent here. So we're going to line up these edges of the vent. And we're going to fold this 1.5 inches. You really want to make sure that both sides of your vent are going to match one another. So the other thing you can do is once you have one folded up, it's better to make sure that they're going to match rather than measuring each one separately. So we're going to take this other one here and let this edge here fold for a little bit so that it stays nice and straight. And now we know we need to fold this one right here, right sides together. And then let's double check it, because we don't want our vent to be crooked, right? So this is the moment when this happens. All right, I think I can go a tiny bit more. All right, just like that. All right, so now we're gonna sew along this vent edge at our seam allowance. So 1/2 inch. Do both sides. We're going to clip our corner. Get a nice crisp corner. All right, now we're going to press our whole hem the same amount. Okay, we're going to blind stitch the hem on the skirt, and if you have this stitch right here, it has a straight stitch on the right, and then it goes over one stitch, comes back, does a couple of stitches, over, back. It looks like this. And so if the stitch is on the left, the zig is over there, that's the blind hem stitch. So I'll show you what it looks like as a stitch. Okay, so this is what that stitch looks like. So in between each of these zigzags is about 3 stitches, and that's what you're looking for. If you have that stitch on your machine, that's what I'm going to be using, all right? So a blind hem is a little confusing when you think about it, but honestly, once you get going, it's really easy and it's kind of clever. So when you have your hem pressed up just like this, you're going to fold it back right here on this edge. So I love that when I have an overlock edge right here, that I will usually try and put the fold somewhere about there. So this fold here, because I stitched a little further past that, we're just going to do it at a little bit of an angle. So really the trick with this is getting that zigzag when it goes over. It needs to be the right distance away, because all you want to catch is one little strand of your fabric. You don't really need to catch a lot. So we need enough space in this seam allowance in order for it to zigzag over to our left and catch this fold here. So I'm going to decrease the width because that one looked kind of wide, and I don't have much space right here to start with. But that's okay. It doesn't have to be like all the way up to this edge. So what we'll do is we'll start about right here. And we're going to sew in the seam allowance of this overlocking here. And then, like I said, it's going to jump over, grab one stitch of the fabric, and then come back over. So we'll do it real slow and see how it's doing. And so that's not enough. We need it to catch. So I'm going to bring it back and try again. There we go. And then once you kind of get the hang of this, you can go pretty quickly. The smaller the bite, the more invisible it is. And that's kind of the balance that you have to strike when you're doing this. If you miss one, don't sweat it. You don't want to miss a few, because if you're someone who wears things like high heels and you catch your high heel in your hem, you'll trip or you'll rip your hem. Let's take a look and see how it looks. And see right there, you can see one little stitch that's as big. That's pretty big right there. I'm not very good at this. I haven't done it in a while. But for the most part, you can't see any of the other stitches because it matches the fabric. One thing that might be a good tip is on my machine, the little divot in my presser foot that indicates the center where my needle is when it's at center, that is where the zigzag happens. And so if I line up that edge with the fold, that's most likely going to be the optimal spot for the needle to catch the fabric. So you might not have that same divot, but just look for other things to kind of rely on. It doesn't matter if it's a part of your machine or a marking that they gave you. Just find something for you that means that you can kind of rely on where to look and where to line up your edges. And then you'll pretty much have success with doing this. This isn't a hard thing to do. It's just one of those really subtle, mysterious things. When you go through areas like this seam right here, it's okay if the machine is only stitching through the seam allowance. It's just going to be more invisible on the other side. It's still at least secured to the skirt. It doesn't have to go through the outer shell. It just needs to be secured. I'm going to switch to a straight stitch and do my back stitch. And I'm going to slide it over so it's in the serging there, the turned up bit, and then I'm going to do my back stitch just like that. All right. All right, and then you can see our little, it looks kind of like a heart rate. And where, let's see, I missed one. Oh, I didn't miss one. I just got it barely on there, but you can kind of see exactly what it looks like. And then on this side, you see that little fold edge. Once you iron that, it pretty much goes away. You still will see a little bit of that crease there, but it's pretty invisible. All right, good job on your Elmwood skirt. Let's check it out. It looks so nice. Look at these pockets. And we have our clean finished interior here. We put in an invisible zipper. Look at that. Ooh, so fancy. And we have our lining and our vent. Let's check it out inside out. It's always the best, right? Check it out. Well, thanks for sewing your Elmwood with me today, and I hope we sew again soon.